What myth did a company invent to sell their products? Clover used to be an intentional part of the American lawn prior to WW2. It thrives in poor soil, fixes its own nitrogen and can survive drought conditions, and was deliberately added to assist with the growth of the surrounding grass. Once wheat acrylic came to market post WW2. It wasn't long before chemical companies successfully rebranded clover as a weeder. Clover is a broadleaf plant and was unintentionally held alongside the other unfavorable weeder, so it was successfully removed from the picturesque perfect American lawn by chemical companies. Dockers invented business casual to sell more khaki slacks and help get men out of wearing suits to work as much. That vitamin water is healthy. Ironically, Vitamin Water won a lawsuit accusing them of false advertising on the basis that no reasonably intelligent person would believe their product was healthy. Edit, technically, they didn't win. They settled for changing their branding and paying the legal fees. Kellogg's basically inventing a food pyramid to convince the public to eat their garbage for breakfast. That cheaty myth persisted for decades. So what you're trying to tell me is that it was a pyramid scheme. Reverse funnel system. Putting some holes in a cardboard box for a pet rock to breathe was one of the most inspired advertising ploys ever. Freaking brilliant. Skechers shape-ups made your ass more tone and bigger. I bought the Reebok shoes that claimed to do this. A year or so later I got a check in the mail for I think around $30. Apparently they lost a class action lawsuit that the shoes didn't do what they claimed. Literally any company that claims detoxifying properties. What toxins? Your kidneys do that for you anyway. The tradition of diamond engagement rings by the De Beers Company. My grandpa used to tell me the story of how he was friends with the guy who created the beverage Talking Rain. The sparkling water became very popular in the 90s and came in a bottle with the story of how the native people of the area found a bubbling spring that seemed to talk as rain fell into it or something. This magical water became the source for Talking Rain. But that was all, of course, just a lie the guy made up to sell carbonated tap water to idiots. Food companies. Practically anything. Fat is not as bad as we thought. Sugar is worse than we thought. Guess who helped make that misunderstanding? How about recent articles that came out suggesting coconut oil is bad for you? Same deal. Look at who writes these papers. I always find a conflict of interest somewhere down the line. Nutella told people their products were a healthy alternative. Women love the smell of an entire can of Axe body spray, which was believed by every teenage boy for years. They also used to give those trial-sized cans out by the ducking case in middle and high school. Our entire locker room always reeked of that sheet because we would take full cans of it and slap them with our track spikes and they'd shoot off across the locker room like a rocket. They also made amazing flamethrowers. Our locker rooms were like Baghdad back in the day. All cosmetics company claiming male and female need a different soap, shampoo, razor. Lately some even tried to apply the gendered marketing to yogurt, toothpaste, handkerchief or pens. Rinse and repeat on shampoo bottles was designed to sell more shampoo. The amount of toothpaste you use when brushing. You don't have to fill the bristles of the toothbrush. Only pea-sized as needed. Commercials shows it more than needed so they can sell more products. Edit, what the? This is too much upvotes, stab guys. McDonald's says it sells ice cream. I see the meme about the ice cream machine being broken everywhere on Reddit and Twitter. Yet I have never had it happen to me. This isn't so much a myth to sell products but to divert blame. Anti-littering campaigns were started by large corporations that polluted heavily in order to shift blame away from them to the individual for keeping the planet clean. Don't get me wrong, people who litter are scumbags. But no one human could produce as much pollution as a factory, let alone an entire industry. Same thing goes for water conservation. A single family uses fractions of a percent of water compared to what industry uses. When you see blame for something shift to individuals, take a moment and look at the broader picture of who the major perpetrators are. Areas to look at: Drew Gus, pharmaceutical industry; water usage, pollution, greenhouse gases, waste in general. All are things we as individuals do contribute to in some way, but that is so small compared to what is actually happening and what companies are doing. This is a little disjointed. On mobile. Can clarify later. It's probably an urban legend, as I can't find a source for it online. But I remember reading about a company that sold canned tuna advertising its product as being guaranteed not to turn black in the can. Of course, tuna would never turn black in the can. But by saying it won't, it implied that competing brands did sell tuna that turned black in the can. That oranges are loaded with vitamin C. There's more vitamin C in a bell pepper than in an orange. I hear soda companies switched from glass to plastic as a cost-saving measure, claiming they were more convenient as you can just throw them away rather than bringing the bottles back for cleaning and refilling. They then blamed consumers for all the additional plastic trash. The Disney Vault. Lol. I remember during the pre-streaming days of how big a deal Disney made about pulling stuff out of their vault for the last time, making a VHS of Dumbo available for a single Christmas season at $29.99. Even then, people had to know that Disney would sell it as long as people bought it. Not a single company as far as I know. But the myth that breakfast is the most important meal of the day. Prior to this, people generally had something small like a piece of toast, if anything. Anything Edward Bernays was involved in. Just a few off the top of my head. Making bacon a breakfast food to help the pork industry sell more. Making green the and shade for a particular fashion season to get people to buy a particular brand of cigarettes. The food pyramid. Any product that mentions the association of something or other recommended. These are what's known as a front group and are normally set up by the marketing campaign so they can claim some sort of professional sounding endorsement. The man is a walking history of how gullible and easily led the average consumer is. They don't even refer to you in human terms in that industry. You're a consumer or a unit. Like ducking cattle. Well, I wouldn't quite call it a myth. But Tang, a company that sold fruit-flavored drinks, is responsible for the mispronunciation of the word orangutan thanks to them using an orangutan as their mascot. Now many people incorrectly pronounce it as orangutan, which I guess counts as free product placement for them. The inventors of OxyContin tried to convince the public that it was a addictive free version of oxycodone. They blatantly lied and were sued for like $500 mother-in-law a while back. So, I don't know if anybody knows this. Big tobacco companies have their hand in more than just cigs causing cancer. The reason horrible cancer-causing flame retardants existed in almost all foam inside furniture for decades was because of these companies. In the 1970s, the government was trying to force big tobacco to make the self-extinguishing cigarette, because it was the main cause of household fires at the time. People falling asleep with a cig in their hand. You get the picture. Well, big tobacco made a bunch of Italy conducted research, as well as spread propaganda for years that it wasn't the cig, which they didn't want to change at all, but that furniture is poorly insulated and catches fire easily. So, skip to about 1990, and people start realizing all these carcinogens are in breast milk, and huge ppm counts of bad shit in humans, caused mainly by people living with this degrading flame retardant coated foam. Firefighters' cancer rates also skyrocketed because of this. Smoke deaths due to the fire retardant burning also spiked. It took something like 10 years or so for a shitload of lawyers and legislators to finally get the law changed in California, the last state requiring flame retardant coated foam. And even then it's still being battled because the chemical companies that sold the flame retardant make so much money off it. It's a much deeper and richer story, but I don't wanna go that far. TLDR, the reason carcinogenic chemicals existed in all foam padded furniture was that big tobacco didn't want to admit that cigarettes cause fires. Razor companies ran ad campaigns to get the public to see women's leg and underarm hair as unhygienic and gross so they could sell razors to women. 2. Now it's so deeply ingrained in our culture I cannot imagine it ever having been normal for women to have leg hair. I just read about this in a book a couple months ago. The man who invented toothpaste deliberately put in mint and other flavors along with a chemical that causes your gums to tingle so that when you wake up in the morning you crave the mint and the tingling feeling on your gums. That is why your mouth feels atrocious if you do not brush every morning. Not a myth per se. But they sold a product that perpetuated itself forward as people used it more and more. Low-fat products which we were told was good for you because fat is bad. Turned out it was bullshit because the low-fat products had more sugar in it to compensate for taste. More sugar carbs is the real cause of many diseases we have. That beer will spoil if it goes from cold to hot. Coors started this because they had refrigerated trucks and pushed that always cold thing. In reality most beer is going from cold to hot multiple times while being shipped out. The real enemy of beer is light and time. GMOs being bad for you. Not only is it ridiculous, marketers take advantage of it all the time. I see poorly labeled non-GMO foods everywhere. Buying non-GMO strawberries? Yes you are. Since GMO strawberries don't exist. There are only 10 GMO plants out there and squash, soybeans, corn, papaya, sugar beets, canola, potatoes, and apples are the only ones you'll run into at the food store. Not that they're harmful in any way. They just involve scary science made up by people who think the earth is round. 3 film students vanish after traveling into a Maryland forest to film a documentary on the local Blair Witch legend, leaving only their footage behind. I did some research on why KFC is the food to eat for Christmas in Japan and found this. According to brand legend, there were some American tourists in Japan during the Christmas holidays back in the 70s. When they couldn't find roast turkey for their holiday meal, they got the next best thing, a bucket of KFC fried chicken. A manager at the local store saw it, told some higher ups, and eventually the marketing team started advertising it as a Christmas tradition to the point that it actually became such a popular tradition you now have to reserve your chicken weeks in advance. Halitosis was basically invented by Listerine. Not to say bad breath didn't exist, but it was just bad breath. Feminine hygiene products, like Lysol, convincing women for decades that their vages smelled bad unless they used their products. They made posters with sad husbands who leave their wife because she smells. The products themselves were unhealthy and caused more problems than they pretended to solve. Kerrygold butter originally was just a standard butter that happened to be made in Ireland. They released a marketing campaign about how you shouldn't cook with Kerrygold because it was a fancier high quality butter. It ended up working and international sales skyrocketed. So they used the money to actually improve their product so that it would be as it is today, a fancier high quality butter. The 1970s fondue craze in the US and Europe was generally started by Schweizer-Kasunian, the Swiss cheese union, which is a cartel of cheesemakers which controlled the cheese output in type and volume of all dairies in Switzerland. It was formed because of a cheese surplus that had built up during WWII, and they wanted to limit supply. So a cartel was formed. After a couple decades of controlling supply, Schweizer-Kasunian decided to push the demand side of Emmental, that's the familiar Swiss cheese with the holes in it, by a marketing blitz. They knew of this dish called fondue, which was sometimes eaten in the Alps, and started advertising it abroad as if it was somehow the national dish of Switzerland. In the 1980s, the Swiss government started to wonder why it was subsidizing a cheese cartel, and there were also suspicions of corruption. Around 1990, the Schweizer-Kasunian collapsed, and the free market opened up, and dairy farmers could thus make whatever goddamn cheese they wanted, above board, for the first time in 40 years. Edit, typos. Spinach is not especially high in iron. The story goes that way back in 1870 a researcher made a mistake with a decimal point and accidentally credited spinach with 10 times the iron content it actually had. The mistake was corrected relatively quickly, but to this day spinach producers still like to push their product based on its iron content, despite the fact that if you compare the actual numbers, spinach is middle of the road among leafy greens on iron. Not a myth. But after PBR's sales slipped from the 80s to the early 2000s, they sent cool, likable, hipster-esque people into clubs. Once there, they would befriend a few people and buy them a drink, which was always PBR. Of course, the people who were on the receiving end of the drinks didn't want PBR, as it was barely popular among its aging rural audience, let alone young hipsters. But the marketer always assured her new friends that she was drinking it ironically, so the friends she made would go along with it. Sure enough, the trend of drinking PBR ironically soared, and as of 2013 its sales were more than 200% higher than they were in 2004. It should be noted that Pabst portrayed itself to be a hipster drink in many other ways that helped boost sales. But I thought this was an enjoyable highlight from their rebranding campaign. Highly expensive short digital cables such as HDMI will make your music sound better. It's literally just 1S and 0S being transmitted, so if there is a loss of data transmission in audio you will get a dropout. You cannot hear the difference between a $5 and $200 HDMI cable. Long cables on the other hand do need to be high quality or else they will break more easily. Especially in the AV industry where cables are being connected and disconnected multiple times a day. Although a lot of companies now use fiber or HDSDI for cabling, you don't need a $200 plus 1M HDMI cable. A $5 HDMI cable will do the trick if it's being plugged in once and left. In general, a lot of the audiophile industry is built on myths. Especially the example I mentioned above. Amps, speakers, processors etc. are not a myth, as quality products will last longer and sound better. But a lot of it is to sell you more expensive products. Those Quay balance bracelet things, I remember seeing those things probably close to 20 years ago. My dad bought it. It's just a FKN bracelet. People are so gullible. Basically like those chakra crystals or super hydro water BS. I think I heard many companies such as Barron's that sell test prep exam make it so standardized testing is common in the US and necessary. Dark colored diamonds were once gems that were basically thrown away by mining companies. They were not as shiny and enticing to customers as the light colored diamonds. At some point a company came up with the idea to rebrand these cheap, crappy diamonds as something desirable. Suddenly these muddy chocolate diamonds were born, and they have since grown into a huge hit. Jewelry companies now make a ton of money from once worthless diamonds. Jaywalking was invented by auto manufacturers. Before them, people walked, talked, and played in the street. It was a public living space, coopted by vehicles. Montgomery Ward commissioned the story of Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer to make the coloring books they were giving away cheaper. The best one I know of is The Rarity and Value of a Diamond. Diamonds are actually common, but they are seen as rare jewels that should cost thousands of dollars, when diamonds aren't really that rare. Yup. Sapphires and rubies, which are red sapphires, are among the least common gemstones. Much more rare than diamonds. Clever marketing and a monopoly on the diamond industry caused diamond prices to soar. Even the chocolate diamonds. Those are diamonds with high amounts of impurities that cause the discoloration and should be worth much less than clear white diamonds. But clever marketing fabricated a desire for them. Do carrots count as a product not from a company? The whole eyesight thing during WWII to present day. That was propaganda though. Wasn't it? It was all a ploy by Big Carrot. That shampoo with no tears on the packaging. That sheet was like ducking acid.